Talking about clean energy, RTG here was talking about the issues when it comes to clean energy, and from what I understood, financing and scale is a major barrier when it comes to clean energy. How is India and particularly the International Solar Alliance as well, what exactly is the ISA doing to ensure that financing doesn't become a big barrier when it comes to adaptation of clean energy?
Thank you so much, and my apologies for being a little late. The world did about $2.2 trillion of clean technology investments. Unfortunately, only 15% of that came to developing countries. And only 2% is coming to Africa, which has 600 million Africans without energy access and a very good solar radiation data. So definitely our role is to see how can trillions that are there in pension funds and others start investing in clean technology. The reason that doesn't happen are largely twofold. One, private sector and pension funds are looking for clarity of policies and regulations that can support their long-term investments. So ISA works on policy and regulatory reforms, and actually there India is a great test case of how clarity of policy, strong political push, and then ecosystem creation with financial institutions, private sector development and others can pave the way for what India has done, 110 gigawatt of solar. We are taking this example to other places. I would say in India's case, the financing challenge on your last question is much more on transmission, because transmission will be one of the binding constraints, and of course land availability. So those in terms of how do we finance, how do we reduce the risk, and for that there are a lot of financial innovation of risk mitigation instruments, use of infrastructure investment trusts that are going to be very vital for India.
Absolutely. I think India has been not just vocal when it comes to climate change, but also in terms of climate action. And like you said, India is doing enough when it comes to all of that. Now, Mr. Amit, we are looking at what's happening around the world. There are wars everywhere, there are conflicts. India has also been involved in a few of them. The reality is the priorities of nations keep changing, and unfortunately clean energy and environmental change comes at the bottom when you look at it. India, again, like you said, like RTG also said, is now beginning to focus and scale up a lot when it comes to clean energy. But then what about the lack of resources? What happens when the supply chain, when it comes to minerals, for example, like lithium? It's a major factor for India's drive towards clean energy. What happens when these sort of supply chains are affected? How does India plan to counter it? Because India doesn't want to be dependent on any other nation, I'm sure, for its clean energy reliance.
Yeah, so I mean, there are wars which are fought explicitly, and there are wars which are fought implicitly through trade wars, through mineral wars, through denial of technology, denial of resources. So war is like a continuous process which is happening, and countries need to evolve, need to secure themselves against those kind of restrictions. So if you look at India's own journey, there is, at the international level, we are seeing what is happening. You've aptly mentioned on what's going on. We are all aware of, without naming the neighbor, that there have been many restrictions on that sense from the economic power that it is, in terms of denial of access to minerals. So there is action on international front. For example, India has formed a PSU named Kabil, which is now going and exploring outside India on what mineral resources we can secure on. So it's important to look out across the world, secure through FTAs, through treaties on what important resources are required inside the country. Manufacturing itself is a big booster. In India, there has been a very strong focus on now semiconductors and solar manufacturing through our PLI schemes, which is a very important driver of how India would require access. But till we are having this manufacturing, we are importing a lot of stuff to India, and with them are also coming very important minerals like lithium is there in lithium-ion batteries, which we import. So Government of India also came out with the critical mineral mission, in which the idea is that anything what we have in terms of natural resources has to be explored, but also what we have in terms of import is also not wasted, which also links with us with the circular economy initiatives. So anything which is imported must not be wasted as such. So there is a strong focus on circularity of many of the waste streams like lithium-ion batteries, e-waste, vehicles, where we want to ensure that any of the important minerals which are not available in India as such are not wasted as such. So it's a multi-pronged thing. Then we also need to focus on the R&D itself. Today lithium seems to be the obvious choice, but can we develop batteries which work as well with sodium, which is the next higher element in the periodic table? If that happens, would we still have that kind of dependency? That is a question we need to answer. So that war has to be fought with multiple fronts and multiple ways at international level through our own exploration, through science and tech internally, as well as making sure that the resource efficiency is at the optimum and we don't waste anything what we have.
Absolutely. A lot of optimism there coming in from the Niti Aayog, and I'm sure it'll bring a smile on a lot of faces here. He was talking a lot about clean energy and how India is trying to secure its future. Help us understand how organizations like ESA, for example, are helping nations like India to secure their clean energy future. Because what you look at, for example, when it comes to, and I'm going a little off track here, when it comes to markets like electronics, is that you see something happening in China. Almost every market that is dependent on mobiles, on electronic items, every market gets affected. And now everyone is realizing that you need to focus a lot on securing your own resources and being self-reliant. A similar story in terms of clean energy as well. What is India doing and how are organizations such as yours helping India?
So I'll answer that question in two parts. The first part is that energy security of how much India wants to do is now closely linked to industrial policy of how much India is producing. And that requires, in our assessment, perhaps a deeper thinking that should India be preparing a supply chain that is not completely everything only in India, but some other neighboring or like-minded countries that can still reduce the overall cost of, say, solar PV. We are seeing a push in all countries, including India, that let's integrate the entire manufacturing within our country. I feel an alternate supply chain requires some countries to come together rather than individual countries. The second important question on that is what is the right balance within existing technologies and new technologies? And for India's energy security, it is very important to have the right policy, not only trying to see what we make today, but what we are going to make 10, 20 years from now, because there's a lot of innovation happening on new technologies, building integrated PV, perovskite, solid-state batteries. I think a huge R&D push, but also a lot of startups who can see how these technologies can be commercialized are very important.
Absolutely. And before we wrap in a while, I started off on the note that everyone's looking forward to COP30, but the reality is if you look at what's happened since then, a lot of promises have remained on paper. A lot of ideas that were floated haven't got financing, which means that with COP30, there is a lot of doubt, a lot of questions being asked. What can India do to push these so-called developing nations that speak a lot about climate change? What can India do? I come back to the